Mr. Twitch. Come on. Alright, there we go. Let's go tell the world that we are online. Streaming, game dev, making cliffs, paste. And then over here, paste. Oh, sorry. Whole bunches of folks saying interesting things in a place where I'm not used to them actually posting anything. I'll have to read up on it later. Alright, so today what we're going to do is make some new meshes. Last time what we used is a whole bunch of these rocks and some of these 90-degree curves to help build our little world here. But we need some cliff sorts. We need some cliffy bits, and we don't currently have any. So we're going to go ahead and build some. Now when I say we don't have any, I'm lying. We have these, but they're terrible, so we're going to delete them and start over. It should be pretty straightforward to do so. What the cliff requires is a slab of rock in a triangular shape. Now the reason it has to be triangular is because we need to be able to rotate it to get different sorts of characteristics. So we're going to be creating kind of a weird shape block. Doop. So this is a cube, and what we're going to do is we are going to bevel away one of these edges. Do I want to bevel it away? No, I don't. I want to just move it like this. Well, there we are. But these are not quite the right positions for the sorts of things we're looking for. So we're going to move this here and there. That's about the right shape. Only problem is it's way too small. So we're going to bring it way up and then move it this way and then apply our location and our scale. And there we have the beginnings of a cliff face. So we're going to just duplicate this and move the duplicate off to the side because we may need it later. And we'll go ahead and call that cliff face A dummy. And this will be called cliff face A. We might use that for collision or something. I haven't decided yet. Alright, so this is obviously not a particularly awesome cliff face, but I think you'll be surprised. If I go in here and I just UV unwrap it, what sort of... This isn't the... This file isn't using the setup I normally use because I just kind of reopened a file that was old. And it's got a different setup than I normally use. I'm not sure why. Oh, there it is. For some reason, these are all on the bottom now where I can't see them because my mic is in the way. Can I make it go to the top? How do I make it go to the top? Can I drag it to the top? No. No, that's the opposite. Well, I guess I'll just bear with it. You have to pardon me if my mic becomes very, very loud, because I have to lean into it to actually see what the heck I'm doing down here. What's going on? This isn't right. Oh, it's upside down. Jeez. The menu turns upside down when it's near the bottom of the screen. That's friggin' weird. Well, it's fine. So what we're going to do is we are just going to mark all of these as soft faces. Boom. We're going to save this, and we're going to head back over here. Now, none of the things that I deleted should have been in use. No, they're not. But we're going to go ahead and just put in that cliff face. So to do that, we'll just take one of these cheap rocks, duplicate it, and put it somewhere like over here. And we'll change out this rock for the cliff. Boom. So if we take a look, for some reason I can't see it. That was weird. Okay, so I don't know why it just didn't get marked dirty or something. Maybe the camera was inside of it. Anyway, with this sort of setup, you can see that even though it's a very, very basic system, because of the rock texture we're using, it's not so difficult to see how it would be used in the world pretty much as is. So with this setup, what you can do is you can rotate the system, rotate the whole rock plane to give you something like this, where you can kind of just get a rock edge. Or you could bring it around to a different location so you get something sharper. Or you could use this side. All of these options are pretty useful. So basically, the idea here is that you're able to use this as a lot of different angles. There are a couple of small changes we need to make in order to make this really work. One of the things we need to do is move this out this way a little bit. And we also need to move this in this way. And that should be okay. We'll just go ahead and resave that. I guess I want to unwrap it again so we don't get any stretching. Yeah, so that will be a little bit more useful when we're trying to build cliffs. But you can see this really, really sharp edge. This really sharp edge is because that's where the UV seam is. It's not that that sharp edge is actually a sharp edge, it's that there is a cut, a UV cut there. That's something that's very hard to get rid of. And you can see it's actually not true. I'm lying. I am 100% on fire. No, wait. Is it true? It should be true, but this is a strange coincidence. Either way we cut it, what we can do is pull over here. This should be UV editing. There we are. Oh, this one predates. This is like this one was created. This file was created in Blender 2.8, like alpha version, which is why it's a little bit screwed up. That's okay though. So you can see that all of the faces have been cut into their own pieces in the UV map, except for this one little piece right here, which is that tab right there. If we wanted to make this a little bit more manageable, what we could do is try and figure out where we want the cuts to be, or we could try and create it in such a way where it uses a tiling textured solution. If we come down and create a cut here, we can mark that cut as a seam. We actually might want to move it up here. There we are. And then what we can just do is cut everything again. I'm trying to determine which seams should be cuttable. And I guess this seam. Alright, so now if I UV unwrap, no, that's a sphere projection. It's a little bit better, but it's still pretty bad. Just to take a look at how that looks instead, we can save it and come back over here. And we still have a pretty sharp edge here. That's definitely still sharper than it should be because I've marked it as a soft set of edges. Didn't I? Oh, I didn't. So the problem might have simply been that I hadn't marked it as a soft edge. There we are. But we still have a UV seam issue. Now what I've done is I've put the biggest UV seams down here. You can see it. Because that's the edge that's the least likely to get used. But I don't like this seam here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually select these faces like this. And here. And you can see how those are not completely split up, but they are split up. We're just going to go ahead and unwrap them in general. Kabloom, like that. We save that and then move back over here. It should be a much smoother, yeah, there we are. That'll give us a plane that we can actually use. Now obviously we can adjust this mesh to soften it or harden it or whatever else we want to do with it. I think that having a straight edge like this is a little bit too obvious, so we're going to go and modify it a little bit so that it's a little bit less aggressive. And the way to do that is to cut like this, and then we can just do some subtle adjustments. Nope. There we are. So if we grab here and pull it forward, nope. I'm experimenting with some of the new features of Blender, and sometimes it's a little confusing to me. That's okay, though. I'll figure it out. So all we're really doing is trying to break up the aggressively edged, 90-degree angles a little bit, which we do just by adjusting these pieces little bit by little bit. Now, one of the issues we're going to have is that this is going to end up creating some unusual shapes because it's not a very good quad, but that's okay. Or at least it might be okay. We'll know whether it's okay in the near future here. Oh, there's still a really, really rough angle here. Just pull the whole thing back. There we are. There. That's a little bit more along the lines of what I need. But even so, this edge, even though it's smooth shaded, it's still too aggressive. It's not a big deal. We'll just go ahead and bevel. So we'll just select the edge, bevel it down like this, and then save it. There you go. That should soften it enough to be more reasonable. Now, what we can do with this is use it to create cliff elements. And the thing about this that's nice is that it's able to create whatever sorts of cliffs we need. At least that's the theory. So the idea is we would use it something like this. So just to check and see how it looks, let's put a couple of these in and then go into the game world and find out whether or not it worked and whether it looks decent. You can see there's a seam right here. Not 100% sure about how I want to handle some of this stuff, but, we'll work with it. No, that's... I figure that for now what we'll do is we'll try and hide that seam like this. Let's just take a look at it. Let's see how it feels. Oh, first time I've pressed play recently, so it's taken a while. I'm sure you could hear me great while I was putting my face into the cup and drinking. Come on, wake up. There we go. There it is. Oh, look, they're invisible. That's nice. Are they just above the water? Okay, I just put them too high. I forgot that these cliffs were actually above the water. That's fine. It'll still work as, a test example here. So you can see that they create this kind of really monolithic stone face, which is kind of the point. They don't hold up, the edges don't hold up when they're this big and you look this closely, but if we're going to create edges like this, we'll decorate them with something. The point isn't that they hold up at close inspection. If they were going to do that, I would have modeled them with more detail. But what we can do is delete one of them, rename this other one as cliff element, change out the collision from rock A2 to cliff face. We could even do it with cliff face dummy, but I think that it's better to be accurate in this case. And then we can start to use this as a tool to try and make things look a little bit more realistically rocky. At least that's the theory. Now I have to remember which of these sides is the one with the bad UV map. It's this one, so we'll use this side. When we look at this, we have to know how high the water is before we can make any decisions, but I think that's probably okay. We can actually raise this up above the water. It'll be invisible if we do, which is the point. So now if we hit play, how does that look? Because the idea is that I want to get rid of the extremely height mappy feel of some of these elements, and one of the ways to do that is to have these kinds of columns. I might use a column sprayer, but the problem is that the current sprayer won't know how to rotate them properly. I'd have to create a new sprayer that rotates a little bit better. So this is how it looks right now, and you can see that the stone's basically... That's not bad. Yeah, I think that works okay. The advantage of using similar stone textures like this is that stones can basically be plunked into stones wherever you need them. You don't need to be too careful about it. But there are still going to be seams if you're not careful. So one of the things you can do, we're just kind of playing around right now, because that's fun, for me at least. One of the things you can do is use a sprayer, like this one, and try to spray away those edges. But right now, this sprayer has much too large a maximum size. So we're going to take this size, bring it from 15 down to 8. And this one, we'll bring it from 5 down to 2. And then we'll also just readjust this so it doesn't actually go down in the middle. All right, so now if we tell this to fire, you can see that we get some small rocks. Now the idea is that we want to hide this seam. So we'll go ahead and just create a laser tight focus on the seam to try and sort this out. There we go. So now if I were to go in there and take a look, will the seam still be obvious, or will it seem natural, or what are we going to get out of it? Now obviously boulders randomly hanging off the side are not really the most realistic approach. What you might do instead is create a stack of boulders or some kind of slide of boulders where they, pile up at the bottom. That is quite possible to do. I just haven't been doing it. So, as you can see, this is a rocky plain, and for something where I didn't do any editing, it's not too bad. Over here, we definitely have some rocks that are going to need to be tweaked, but we did a pretty shitty job. None of these rocks are actually on the seam, but these rocks are something where we can move them manually. So we could take this rock and use it to hide the part of the seam that is the most obvious, which is right here. And then we can take these rocks and move them into a position that's a little bit better suited to us, like... I could use vertex snapping, but the problem is that this isn't a vertex, it's a seam. If it was a vertex, I'd snap. So I think that I actually just missed when I fired my gun. I think I was just pointed at the wrong spot. All we're doing is literally decorating the seam. We could do this automatically. We could have a system that specifically goes and asks for the seam positions. It's something which is not super easy, but it is possible. For now, however, we'll just do it manually. No reason to automate something I don't even think we'll need. So we'll just put this in something like that. Now let's see. When you're working with non-modular elements, the seams are always going to be the part that stand out, and they're kind of what you want to work on hiding. When you have modular elements, the whole point of having modular setups, like square grids, is specifically so that there aren't any seams. That's why those things exist. You can just plonk stuff down and there's no seams. But I don't really want like a square modular ocean, so we're going to do it this way. Yeah, so you can see that the seam is no longer even vaguely visible. It might feel a little bit artificial to have those rocks there, maybe, but it's not something where the player sees a seam. They just see strangely placed rocks. But this edge is no good. Let's go ahead and change it. Basically, the issue is the long 90-degree edge here. We're going to go ahead and put a crease, and then we'll grow. And then we'll save that. Yeah, anything that breaks up that 90-degree slice is good. So now let's go ahead and take this cliff element. We're going to want to bring it on over to here, because this is where we need the cliff stuff. I think we're going to have to create 2 cliff elements, but we'll find out soon enough. So we're going to drag this out and then move it here. Let's reset the rotation and slide it on over. And then we'll create inside of it an empty game object, which will in turn become room 3. And drop this in. There we are. So the problem with this is simply that it is not circular. It is quite square. Now, square is what you need when you're doing some kinds of cliffs, but circular is what you need when you're doing others. And in this case, we need a circular one. So let's go ahead and build one. Just move this aside, and then we will construct ourselves a circular cliff. I don't think we need anywhere near this many edges. 16 will be fine. And then we'll go in and edit it, and yeah, it should be fine. We'll just extrude it up. Oh, I didn't extrude correctly. Extrude up, please. Thank you. And we don't actually want a complete circle. What we would like is like a wedge. The only question is how much we want to delete. I think that's probably good. And then we'll connect here, and then we'll cut. And then we'll move these so that they are a little bit more interesting. And then what we'll do is we will put in, I don't know, let's try rotating this. There. Let me cut here, rotate this, and grow it a little bit. We're going to want to interrupt the flow. So we'll just move some of these lines around a little bit. And then we're going to want to seal off this face. Can I do it with a Shift F or a Control F? Grid fill. No? Fill. Oh, okay. It filled with a valid fill. I thought it was going to fill with a brutal end gun of death. Now the problem is that these edges are really hilarious, so what we're going to want to do is bevel them down. Unfortunately for us, there's no easy way to select the edge because it's not a loop. It's got like a ton of garbage now that we filled it. But we had to fill it before we could bevel it. Anyway, we bevel it down like this. And we're basically limited by this corner here. If we bevel too far, that'll end up becoming inverted, which is not fun. Come on. Some days I feel like Blender 2.8 is a lot more finicky about whether you can click on something. So we'll just do the same thing here. And now what we can do to make this really kind of pop is to do some grid slides, some face loop slides here. That'll change exactly how these edges are shaped, because a simple beveled edge is much too obvious and pointless. So it's important that we get a more natural shape, and we do that simply by grabbing these things and moving them. Yeah, that's not too bad. Something like that should be fine. And then lastly, what we can do is go in and select any face, or any line rather, that seems a little bit too harsh, and just bevel it away. One of the most freeing things about this sort of work is that you don't have to worry about the topology. It can be quite a mess. It's fine, because it's never going to be animated. As long as it looks decent to the eye, it's going to be fine. And you might think we want to put some faces in down here, but we don't. We don't have to. It's just not necessary. So we're going to go ahead and smooth all this. Smooth faces. There we are. And then we're going to unwrap it. We do want to be a little bit careful about how we unwrap this. I think the best way to do it is to mark this as a seam. Let's go ahead and just try it. Let's go ahead and see what it does on its own. Yeah, you can see it carved almost everything apart. We'll go ahead and just take a look before we do something more aggressive about it. But what we're going to need to do is name it. We'll call this Cliff Circular. There we are. I'll save that. And then we come back over here and we swip it out. So this is no longer Cliff Face A, it's now Cliff Circular A. And then of course our collider also needs to be Cliff Circular A. And you can see that this is much, much smaller. So we're going to just do some scaling and moving and stuff. So scale it up by 4. Yeah, that's about right. And then just move it up and then move it this way. And then down a little bit. And then apply scale, apply location, apply rotation. Why not? Kablooby. There we are. So now this is what we've got. Let's take a look. It does have some seams, but we'll try it out for a while. This seam in particular bothers me. Look at that. That's awful. Maybe it'll look like it's a cracked stone when I actually look at it in game. We'll go ahead and just do things for now. So what we'll do is set this up to be a cliff element. Like so. And just cap it like this. And you can see that this is obviously much nicer than just having the height map, because the height map is so obvious and jaggy. And that's one of the reasons why one of the rules is you don't use your height map to prevent people from walking around. If your height map is a cliff, you actually want to have a mesh there for the cliff. It's just basic level design philosophy, because otherwise it will end up looking really jaggy and terrible. And everybody will say, hey, this guy doesn't know anything about making games. And then you'll feel real bad about yourself. All right, let's go ahead and move the character so I don't have to swim all the way there. That would be a little bit far for us, so we'll just grab ourselves and shoop, boink. There we go. Pink Hair came by. Hello, Pink Hair. I hope that I haven't left you hanging for long. I tend to sometimes not look very hard at the chat. Right, so here we've got the setup, and you can see that we're catching some real glow. Now the reason for this glow is actually the upwards light. I put in an upwards light, and it's catching this rock face pretty badly. You can see that we have a really awful seam. Pinkhair says he's seen some amazing height map work. I mean, if you've seen some height map work that can do cliffs okay, then you've probably seen something that's not a height map. But who knows? I mean, go ahead and show me some other, some corrected elements. I'm happy to hear it. It's just that height maps are not very good at sharp lines. So in order to create a cliff, you naturally have to either make it completely straight or soften it, in which case it's not really very much of a cliff, is it? So without the underlight, these are not too bad. To be honest, there should be foliage over top of us, blocking a lot of the light coming down. There isn't right now, but there should be. This is really basic stuff, and it looks not great. The shape is fine. Whoa, why am I getting such a slowdown all of a sudden? The shape is fine, but the seams are the worst. So I guess we're going to have to re-unwrap it. So to create seams that don't suck, we have to decide where we want those seams to be. And I think what we'll do is we'll put them on the inside here. Because if they're on the inside, then that's an area we're unlikely to use with this shape. So we can get away with making them a separate island. Sorry, I'm thinking while I'm clicking, and I'm trying to figure out where the best spots are. I think we'll start by marking this seam. But I'm not sure that's going to be enough. We'll go ahead and try it. So if we just unwrap this, boom, you can see that what we got is kind of a interesting shape. Let's give it a shot. Let's see how that feels. Yeah, I think that's definitely better. It's a little bit stretched is the problem. That's okay. Yeah. So when you compare this to this, it's pretty clear which of them feels, more natural and more realistic. The rock edging helps quite a bit. And that's the basic idea here. It's a basic principle. One of the other things we could do is we could make this material a splat, in which case we wouldn't have to UV unwrap anything, and it would vary from place to place. We can always experiment with that later. For now, let's go ahead and just finish experimenting here. We'll create a few more cliff faces, and we will also decorate them with boulders. So we'll just go ahead and duplicate this mesh sprayer, pull it down into room 3, and we can use this mesh sprayer, if I can find it. We can use this mesh sprayer to do some decorations to really change out the fact, what this looks like. So I think we're going to want to change the sizes again. I made them quite small before. We're going to make this back to 5, and we'll make this 12. No, that's not 12. There we are. That's 12. Just softly. And when we detail spray it, kabloom! You can see how it just immediately creates huge boulders. That's a little bit too big. Let's go ahead and just adjust it a little. And we'll just move it so that it's blocking the, we'll just delete that one. We don't need it. So now what you can see is that the weird seam here is still visible, but it's been ensconced by boulders, and so it's not going to be nearly as obvious. Oh, he's using Dragon Quest XI as Pink Hair is as his example of hype maps that don't suck. So Dragon Quest XI had some. I actually don't know if this is Dragon Quest XI. It looks just like Dragon Quest XI. It might be like Dragon Quest Builders or something. But the thing about those hype maps is that I don't believe that these are pure hype maps. I think that a lot of it is. For example, the cliff faces leading down into the walkways. Those are probably hype maps. But in the distance, below the city, where you've got the piled up boulders, I think those might actually be meshes. Either way, they're using a really cool hype map system that softens the edges of the hype maps. I don't know whether it's just having a really, really high density hype map or baking your hype map or what, but that's not the sort of visual you can get out of a Unity hype map, because the Unity hype map goes into Jaggies. Here it is. Pink Hair says that he's seen the data for it's World of Warcraft. I see. And Dragon Quest XI and World of Warcraft have the same visuals. Pink Hair says he's seen the data. I would be interested in importing that data into Unity and seeing whether a Unity hype map would look anywhere near as good, because I think that that is a hype map that has gained a lot by implementation. The actual hype map visuals are not a default hype map rendering mechanism. They're using something to crisp up those edges rather than having jaggies. But, I mean, it's worth checking. Let's go ahead back into the terrain here and just see what sort of things we can do to try and make this a little bit less jaggy. So if we do a raise or lower terrain and we give ourselves a real crisp edge here and bring it down to just a size of 0.5, you can see how short and tight this is. Have you lowered the pixel error on the height map? I can increase the resolution, but I don't know how pixel error works. Oh, here it is, pixel error. Have I lowered it? I have a feeling I need to draw in order for this to work again, don't I? It's not going to just change something. Let's go ahead and use a soften brush for a second here. Pink Hair says that he doesn't agree with my height maps philosophy, which is fine. But I really don't like relying on height maps too much, especially in Unity. I'm not going to. However, I'm always happy to learn, and if it turns out that height maps are more powerful than I gave them credit for, that will be a fine thing to learn, because it will make my life much easier if I can just use height maps for everything. I just, in the past, haven't found that to be the case. Okay, lowering the pixel error made it hugely better. What the hell is pixel error, and why is it set to dumb? So what I've done here is I've just roughed up this edge a little bit to try and hide some of the jaggies. See whether or not I can get a more lifelike edge out of this. So you can see that the jaggies are fading away rather rapidly now. And I played with it before and I couldn't get them to fade, so I think that the pixel error really is a big factor. I just didn't even know that was a thing. That's why it's good to do this sort of thing on stream. You can get someone to tell you what's up long before you can figure it out yourself. Alright, so here we're using a rock texture, and over here we're just using a sand texture. And the sand texture is always going to look indistinct and bland, but this rock texture actually seems really pretty nice, at least at the edge. We're hiding it. See, it's still very jaggy, but because of the way the rock texture is displayed, those jaggies feel like rocks. Let's take a closer look. There's the face over there. That still feels pretty fake. It's definitely better. Maybe this is a situation where the texture matters more than I think. Let's find out. If we go over to Paint Texture and we set this rock texture up, we can paint in a harder rock texture wherever we want a harder rock texture. I think that we're currently set to a very soft, yeah, we were set to a very soft level there. So we can just go ahead and let's expand this to 1 and just make it hard rock here. Now, obviously, one of the problems is that this height map is a ridiculously aggressive drop, mostly because I was just trying to set it up fast. I could reduce the drop here, make it so it's less aggressive. No, that's still paint, still the wrong thing. Let's paint smooth height. There it is. By smoothing this, I should be able to drag stuff up. Pankara continues. He says, one thing that is somewhat hard to do in Unity is making use of the topography of the terrain mesh. In WoW, they make heavy use of knowing how the grid is laid out so that sharp edges lie along the same grains as the tessellation. That's exactly what's missing in Unity. I'm actually not 100% sure they even use tessellation. I know that they can, and I know that they didn't used to. I would imagine that they probably have implemented it by now, though, because it's something where that would be pretty silly. For some reason, Smooth really prefers to drag things down instead of dragging things up, which is a little bit strange, but whatever. So basically what I'm trying to do is make it so that instead of being from height 0 to height 80 in 1 pixel, it's from 0 to height 80 in like 3 or 4 pixels. And you can see that even though I'm using way more pixels on the cliff face now, you can tell just by the fact that it dragged all of my surface texture down into the depths. It doesn't feel like it's not a strict cliff. It still feels like a strict cliff. So you don't have to do it quite as aggressively as I was doing it, because I was just painting it fast. In fact, I did it on stream, so you could rewind time and take a look at how I did it. Let's see how this looks. Now I'm just looking at the edge, I'm not looking at the dirt in the middle. That's not bad. That's actually quite a bit better than I thought that Unity could do this. It might be because of Unity's new terrain shader, which allows for normal maps. The version of Unity I was using before, I actually don't think it allowed for... It might have, but they didn't come across this crisply. This texture might be well suited. I think it's the default texture. I don't think I actually created this one. I think this is a default Unity material, or default Unity texture set. Yeah, that's pretty good. I actually think I can use this. That'll save me a lot of time. So we're going to be using the Unity textures and the Unity height map a lot more aggressively than I thought we were going to. And that should be fun. It's something where I don't usually get to cut quite as loose on this. But here's the thing. If we switch this over to another texture, like say sand, the edge stops looking anywhere near as smart. And partly that's because sand is supposed to be a soft mound, right? But partly it's because this edge is benefiting hugely from the textures that we're using, which conceal the jaggies. That said, we do want to have a nice soft sand pile on top of this cliff face. It's way too big. So we'll just pile up some sand here. Like that. And let's take a look at how that feels. Yeah, I buy it. Do you guys buy it? What do you think? Does this seem like a stony thing coming out of the depths to you? I think it's okay. Yeah. A little bit basic, but not too bad. Maybe I will add in just a touch of emphasis. But one thing, oop, that's not what I wanted, undo. One thing I need to do is create a different lighting section for this, because right now the lighting is bold, and it's not really what we want at all. So if we go up here to the sun, and we just turn it off, you can see how dark everything gets. Well, this is supposed to be an underwater area that's partially occluded by leaves or some other kind of overhang. But even in the pitch black, you can see how it gets to be blue down there, and that's because the fog is set to be blue. So what we actually need to do is have something where the fog changes color depending on where you are. And obviously that's going to be a trigger volume right in here. So for that, we're going to want to create that trigger volume as a cube. So there's our cube, and we'll just drag that cube out here and scale it up. There we are, something like this. And basically, we're going to want to have two of these, one going each direction. And the basic idea is that when you pass through one of them, it's going to change the lighting and the fog color. That might be a little bit, let's try it here. Yeah. So we're going to take out the mesh renderer, and this is a trigger. And we already have like an on trigger event firer, but it doesn't know how to change fog color. So we're going to need to be, Pinker says, still needs decoration though. Yeah, that was just me finding out that it's better than I thought, not me finding out that it's magic. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into our scripts. Here's our helpers. We got lerp to parent and start helper. I think we have an on trigger. That might have been a different, project. I just don't want to create the same thing over and over. Well, whatever. So we're going to go ahead and create a level helper. And the level helper will have a couple of functions. It'll have an on trigger, and it'll do a couple of other things there. Oh boy, thanks! I'm so glad that you're going to install stuff for me. It's been a long time since the last VS Code update. At least like 4 hours. What is it, on trigger? Let's go ahead and, on trigger enter, I believe. Let's go ahead and look that up. I can never remember. Unity on trigger enter. Collider. Hey, fuck you. Don't know why you're red. I think it's probably desynced due to excessive updates. Anyway, we're also going to want to have the events system here. Public Unity event on trigger enter, or rather on player enter trigger. And then in here, we're going to go ahead and call it if the collider is the player. So in order to check and see whether it's the player, I believe we can just ask the player whether it exists. So I think it's like player controller or something similar. Live, there it is. See? So we're going to say if collider.is or transform.is child of player controller.live. Transform on player entered trigger .invoke. And that's pretty easy, but we're going to need some helper functions because the whole point here is we need to do some stuff that would normally be a little bit difficult. So we're going to need to have a public void. We'll delete these guys up here for now. Change fog color. Color. And that's going to be to change the fog color. I actually don't remember how. Unity change fog color script. Render settings.fog color. Here we are. And we're going to want to have another one for public void change fog density. Render settings.fog density. Now, one of the things we can do is the only issue with this is that we're changing settings we're changing render settings during play. If we later decide we want to change the render settings for the scene, then what we'll end up doing here is we will end up overriding that with whatever is set in here. So we're setting it in several places, which is going to be a little annoying. We're also going to want the ability to change the lighting, but we'll do that later. So we'll just go ahead and go on back down to that cube we created. We're going to call this a fog setter. Here's our level helper. Blow. And then we're going to tell it to change the fog color. Okay, so we can't actually pass it a color. We are apparently not allowed to call this function from the inspector, presumably because nobody at Unity ever bothered to implement the color variable as something that could be passed. So instead we're going to go ahead and put the color here. Which is dumb. So now that we can change the fog color, what we're going to do is change it to pitch black when we walk through this. And in order to test that, we're going to want to grab the player, there we are, and pull them over into this area here so that we actually can pass through the box. Apollyon stopped in. Hello. How are things going? All right, I put us in a wall, but that's okay. So here you can see that we've got a blue fog. And what we're going to want to do is, there we are. You can see it changed to black. Now, obviously, we don't actually want to change it like that. What we want to do is lerp to that color. Otherwise, we would only be able to change the fog color by just by in places where there was no fog, which wouldn't be right. Apollyon asks if things are going fine. Yeah, actually, Pink Hair taught me some details about Unity's height maps that led to it being a lot more useful than I thought it was going to be. So now we're playing around with how this cave element should look, and programming something to change these on the fly. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to make this a lerp to the color. Public void lerp update. And it's going to be public bool lerp to color equals false. And we're going to have a public void on trigger exit. Collider. We're going to have public bool player in zone equals false. And then here we're going to say player in zone equals true. And then down here we're going to say the opposite. So what we're going to do here in update is if the player isn't in the zone, we're going to just leave. If not player in zone, then leave. Otherwise, if we're lerping to the color, then we want to lerp to the color. So we'll say color C equals color.lerp render settings.fog color color ref time.delta time. So once we've got a color there, we can then set this. So we'll grab here, move it up here, boom. And then down here in change fog color, we'll just say lerp to color equals true. Easy enough, right? Apollyon is running off the side of my screen because for some reason Twitch scrolled left. He's saying, I think I picked up some of your old tutorials to check out an old project of mine during the week. Had to look at Unity after some time in other engines. Yeah, I wouldn't say my tutorials are the best out there, but they exist. I'm not a huge fan of Unity, believe it or not. I know that I come off as a huge fan of Unity because that's all I really use on camera. But the simple truth is that Unity is one of many options, and I would never begrudge anybody for choosing a different option. Which way am I pointed? Yeah, I'm pointed the right way. So we're going to see whether or not this... There we are. You can see how it just suddenly flicked to black, even though I told it not to. Oh, you see, I'm an idiot. There we are. That's better. Please lerp between these two colors and then ignore that result. Pink Hair is giving me links to one of Kajiro's things. So I love Kajiro's work, and I might use it, but I'm not sure yet. I got burned by the aura fog. It's not nearly as useful as I thought it would be. So I've been hesitant to, do anything else. Apollyon says the Minecraft one was okay. That's the one I hate the most. It's so out of date. Anyway, we're going to want to make this a pretty big box, because otherwise the player might get through it before it's done lerping. Then we're going to duplicate this and move it on over here, and we're going to have another fog setter that sets the fog back to a blue. The only problem is that it doesn't match the actual render settings, so we end up getting a darker blue than the render settings actually indicate. And then it goes to black. I'm not sure. We might have to polish this, create some custom code to read the render settings and stuff like that. We'll figure it out. The lerp is really aggressive. Let's bring that down. Now, one of the things that we want to do here is also block off the light. So we're going to go ahead and create some elements to block off the light and see what sort of result we get there. So to do that, we're going to be here in room 3, and we'll be using a plane. Planes do block. Yeah, I could even use a quad, I guess. That doesn't matter, they're temporary. So what we're going to want to do is line those up above the water. Bloop. Apollyon wants to use the new jobs system, but hasn't figured it out yet. Yeah, I've been playing around a little bit with the jobs system. It's a good way to do a lot of the things that used to be expensive. I wish it had come out before I made my trash game, because then I would make it part of my trash game. That's a game that could have really benefited from it. There are some people who do a pretty good job describing it, but I don't have any of those links open. If you're trying to use it without a tutorial, I recommend you go and get a tutorial. You will regret trying to figure it out on your own. Yeah, so we definitely are in the shadows here, and you can see the shadow range is quite low. See the shadows creeping forward on the sides there. I think the shadow range might be set to 50 meters, or even lower, which is obviously wrong. We don't want it to be that small. But it does appear that the shadows work, aside from their extraordinarily short range. Pink Hair regrets trying to figure it out even with a tutorial. Yeah, I mean, it's something where if you don't figure it out, that's fine. You can create games without it. It's just that it's really useful if you want to do a million moving particles, which is what my game at the time was about. Let's extend that shadow range. That's a ridiculously low shadow range. So we'll go into, I believe it's in the build settings. No, it's not. It's in project settings. And what we want to do is in the quality here. Is it in shadows? Quality, shadow distance. 40. Why is 40 the range in very high? That's ridiculous. Let's make it 200. Which might seem too high, but whatever. There we are. And Pink Hair is saying I should use a baked light map. So the problem with the baked light map is that this stuff that you see glittering below me is not baked. It can't be baked. But it is. I mean, I could work it out so it's like half baked and half not. I think I've actually turned baking off. I might turn it back on. Either way, changing the lighting distance seems to have broken the shadows entirely, because that's obviously what improving the lighting range would do. It would just break your shadows. I don't get it. Maybe when I increased the range, I decreased the quality level? Like I have to increase the number of cascades or something? I mean, look. We're clearly on a plane here. Everything below us, I can't even go back down because there's a material in the way. Everything below that should be in shadow, and it was in shadow until I changed the shadow range. Yeah, that must be what happened. I increased one without the other. Maybe what I should do is change that back. Nope. No, I changed it, and now it's just broken forever. That's how it works in Unity. That's just something I missed. Let's try baking it. Now that I have something here. So what we're going to do to bake it is we're going to come up here to the sun. These caustics are needing to be light real-time only. There we are, real-time only. And the sun is going to be mixed. Yeah, that's correct. Good. It was already set up correctly. And then here's the ambient boost, which I don't think we need anymore. There we are. So let's go ahead and bake it and see what happens. So we'll go into our rendering lighting. Apollyon says that I probably changed the quality level. Well, first let's go ahead and generate the lighting. We'll come back in a minute. The reason I had this turned off is simply because it would constantly churn whenever I moved a rock. Oh, ETA to 40 minutes. Okay, that sounds good. Let's go ahead and do other things while it churns for 40 minutes. We can go back into those settings and just take a quick look. Maybe I did change something. So, oh, I see. So it stays on whatever you last edited. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. I may have to have a third cascade. Of how it worked. So I ended up doing something not the wisest. My computer is just go at it. That's fine. We're all patient. We're so patient, I'm going to get another glass of water. Pinker says, for large shadows, you can probably lower the light map quality by a ton, so you'll be using real-time up close.